If you're in the Tomb Raider fandom, you probably know that the sequel to the 2018 live-action reboot film Tomb Raider has been in development, especially thanks to a recent tweet from the film's writer and director, Misha Green, who said in May that the first draft of the script is finished and the tentative title is Tomb Raider Obsidian. It's still a little early on to even definitively say that the film will be made, but since we got this little hint that it's on its way somewhere, I thought I might as well share what I would personally like to see in this film to improve on the failures I found with the first one. Some of what I'm saying here is under the assumption that they will try to loosely follow the plot of Rise of the Tomb Raider, similarly to what they did with the first film and the first game in the trilogy. And that might not be true, but some of my thoughts here still apply regardless in a more general sense. Number 1, better side characters. The first film really flopped on this one. The beginning of the film tried to introduce us to a lot of people in Lara's life, like fellow boxers and cyclists and people she knew from her job, but then none of them came back into the picture later on. This is a lot different from the tight-knit cast from the game it was based on. So with Obsidian, I'm really hoping for a lot more focus with this aspect. If you're going to introduce someone, make it purposeful. There was just about one true side character for Lara in the first movie, besides her father, and that was Liu Ren, the drunken sailor who took Lara to her destination. And sadly enough, he might as well have died as soon as they got there, because nothing else he did in the movie had any lasting impact. So I hope they don't try to make him Lara's sidekick going forward, because there really just wasn't enough to him for that to work well. If they're going for the plot of Rise of the Tomb Raider, I hope they actually include more of the game characters this time around. You can skip Jonah, since you didn't have him in the first movie, but if you're going to have a group of people like the Remnant, Jacob and Sophia have a lot of potential for characters in a movie. I think you could actually do more with them in a movie than they did with them in the game, so it would be amazing if they really went with that in Obsidian. Like their history, their father-daughter relationship, Jacob's true identity. A movie format can bring a lot more of that to light, because the scope isn't as limited to just what Lara sees. Overall, I just want good characters in the film to carry me through everything else that might end up uninteresting. There were no characters in the first film that I really actually liked. Because number 2, consistency with Lara's own character. Just like with the minor characters, there was a weird issue with the first film where they introduced all these elements of who she was at the beginning, like boxing and cycling, that seemed like they would become important later, but never did. She never used any boxing moves while fighting Matthias, she never had to ride a bike fast or anything, and these were things that weren't from the games, so it's not like they shoved it in there as a treat for fans of the trilogy. It was pointless to spend all that time on something that would never be seen again. This is a big problem with some other movies for me too, like the 2011 Three Musketeers movie. They just introduce things at the beginning that seem like they're gonna come back later, but then they never do. So with Obsidian, let's make Lara's traits important. Let's have her use some boxing skills in a fist fight, or give her a life or death bike chase, or even give us a throwback to the older games by making it a motorcycle chase. If you don't go back to those first traits of her from the Tomb Raider film, at least make everything new you introduce for Lara actually be important instead of just a throwaway moment. I'm hoping that with one writer instead of the 2 or 3 that the first film had, there will just be more consistency with the story across the board. With this sequel, they really need to nail the precise personality that this Lara is going to have in this version of the Tomb Raider universe. They were all over the board, yet also managed to just be boring with Lara in the first film, and I want them to find and stick with a very notable personality for her, and just make her a more intriguing and likable hero overall. I felt like I had no reason to root for Lara in the first film, so as she goes on her next adventure, I want to feel a lot more invested in her. Number 3, good villains. This is another spot that really felt like a flop with the first movie. Matthias went from a creepy old cult leader in the game to a generic action villain who isn't scary in the slightest. He just orders people around. And Rise of the Tomb Raider has really great villains, I think, with Anna and Constantine, and I really hope they go with them for Obsidian. We really got the hint at the end of the first movie that they definitely will have Anna be a villain moving forward, as they should, so I hope they follow along with her connections to Trinity and her brother and how she manipulated him into becoming the intense bad guy that he is. Even if they don't follow a lot else of Rise, this is the one thing I would want. And because they already introduced Anna, it can only get more impactful, right? They can actually make Anna's relationship to Lara more powerful in the movie than in the game, because we know her a bit better here. Plus, there's a lot of good scene potential from the game, like when Anna pretends to be captured alongside Lara, only to reveal her true intent. Anna and Constantine are just so sinister and intriguing, and people like villains like that. I doubt they made any fans of the first movie through Matthias, but they could do it with the siblings here. But whoever the villains do end up being, just make them unique, make them imposing, and make them interesting, because Matthias sure wasn't. Number 4, more action. Thinking back, there wasn't that much action in the first film for an action movie. At least, nothing that was particularly memorable. They definitely tried, and they almost got there sometimes, but there was nothing that was as entertaining as fight scenes from the original movie, or as excitingly complex as some of what Lara goes through in the Tomb Raider reboot. So with Obsidian, let's have some more thrills and spills, some high-energy fights. Give me some tense stealth, shootouts, climbing, swinging, the ground crumbling beneath Lara's feet. Rise of the Tomb Raider is filled with these oh crap moments of how on earth is she gonna get out of this situation? And that is so exciting. I want it all to be a dangerous adrenaline rush, and they didn't fully sell that the first time around. The slow moments should be saved for emotional development alone, and everything that more actively moves the story forward should feel as exciting as playing the video game is. Number 5, supernatural elements. One of the most important parts for Lara's story in the 2013 game is that she doubted her father's belief in the supernatural alongside everyone else, but then witnessed it firsthand and had her life turned upside down thanks to it. But they made it an ancient disease instead of magic in the movie version, which really lessened the impact of the whole plot. With Obsidian, please, 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 let's make it centered around something supernatural. That's what so much of Tomb Raider games, movies, and comics have always been about, and if you leave it out, you've lost a core piece of the Tomb Raider formula. I want to see Lara confront the mythical and win despite being a normal human, because she's just that cool. I don't want more of this borderline zombie disease thing that was going on in the first movie. It felt like a cop-out so people wouldn't find the sudden magic too jarring at the end. But that was their own fault for only incorporating some aspects of the game and getting rid of others, instead of introducing magical moments earlier on like they did in the game. So Obsidian has to either completely carve its own path away from the plot of Rise of the Tomb Raider, or not be afraid to commit to all the interconnected aspects of it. And this leads directly to the final thing I want from the sequel. Number 6, something different from the game. This might be a bit weird for the people who know that I don't like the first film, mainly because it changes so much from the game. But yeah, I don't want Obsidian to try to follow the plot of Rise of the Tomb Raider too closely. I do believe that if they do take parts of it, they shouldn't change them very much, because that's what the first film did and messed up with, but I don't want it to go too far in the other direction to where they try to hit all the same plot points from the game. There are a few reasons for this. The first is runtime, because either the movie will be too long and too boring, or things will happen at too fast of a pace for them to have real importance. And the second reason is budget, because there are some things in the game that would require a huge budget to look good in a live-action film. That's why I wouldn't want parts like the mountain climbing at the beginning or the battle against the Deathless Ones near the end. A condensed version of Rise of the Tomb Raider would be necessary if they are going to take that route, which again, they might not. The sequel might have nothing to do with the game sequel, save for Anna being proved as a bad guy. And that could be a good thing, as much as I wish that these movies were just magnificently accurate adaptations of the Tomb Raider Survivor series, because I think the original live-action film was as good as it was, in my eyes, because it allowed itself to be a separate thing. They merely took the main elements, like Lara, archaeology, adventure, action, Croft Manor, the supernatural, and took it in their own direction instead of trying to follow one of the games. So it stands on its own, and you can't make these damning comparisons to the game to see where it failed in those ways. So I would really like to see them take some parts of Rise of the Tomb Raider for Obsidian. I want to see Constantine as the villain, Siberian mountains and the Gulag for cool locations, and Jacob and Sophia would make for great side characters to help guide Lara towards her goal. But I would like it to be on a smaller scale and take the game seriously, not try to change it and end up making it awful again as the first film did. But also, if they ignore the game plots almost completely from here on out, I think that could be a good thing by distancing themselves from the criticism it could lead to from huge game fans like me who point out all the dumb changes. Because when you tiptoe between something original and an adaptation of the game, ultimately you're going to fail on both ends. And of course, as a fan of Tomb Raider and Lara Croft, I don't want this film to fail. I want it to be great. And I do think that the sequel to the Tomb Raider movie could end up being better than the first one, especially thanks to having the same and singular writer and director, which will hopefully fix the messy direction that was one of the biggest issues for me in the first. I just want to see some respect for the source material, either by leaving it alone except for whatever references are necessary, or by staying true to the core parts of the plot and not shifting it around completely while keeping the same name, like they did with Queen Himiko and Matthias in the first film. But yeah, I have some faith in this thing despite really disliking the first. Hopefully I won't be too disappointed if it does go through production. Maybe I'll make more videos about Obsidian as more updates and eventually trailers on the real thing come out, but who knows when that will be, so just subscribe if you'd like to see more videos about Tomb Raider and other video games and video game movies. I make all sorts of content about all sorts of games, and I'm always open to suggestions, so comment if you want to chat with me, and if you've made it this far in the video, how about you just like it too? If you didn't like the video, hey, you can like it for this picture of my kitten. He's pretty cute, right? Anyway, until next time, stay groovy, you wonderful people.